The unknown threat. The Sci-Fi Empire had ruled the stars for over 1,000 years. Their warships crushed entire civilizations. Their names spread fear across the galaxy. No species had ever dared to challenge them. But today, something was different. On the bridge of the Sci-Fi warship Vorak, Admiral Varlock stood tall, his sharp blue scales glistening under the control room's dim lights. His piercing black eyes studied the holographic map in front of him. An unidentified vessel had entered their territory, moving steadily toward one of their border stations. Another lost explorer. One of the officers scoffed. Varlock smirked. Perhaps some foolish species seeking trade. He turned to his communication officer. Hail them. Let them know they are trespassing in Sci-Fi space. The officer pressed a few buttons. A signal was sent. Seconds passed. No response. Varlock frowned. Strange. Send a second message. Still, silence. The unknown ship kept moving. Varlock's amusement faded. Scan that vessel, he ordered. The scanners hummed as they gathered data. The results appeared on the screen, and the officer's face turned pale. Sir, this ship has no known energy signature. Its hull is made of unknown materials. Our sensors can't penetrate its shields. Varlock narrowed his eyes. Impossible. Sci-Fi technology was the most advanced in the sector. Every ship, every weapon, every shield. They had seen it all. And yet, this vessel was something new. Another officer spoke, his voice hesitant. Sir, we're detecting movement near its exterior hull. It's adjusting its course, directly toward us. The Admiral's jaw tightened. They are challenging us. He let out a low growl. They have no idea who they are dealing with. He turned sharply to his weapons officer. Arm the plasma cannons. Fire a warning shot. Let them know we are not to be ignored. The Vorak's cannons glowed bright orange, releasing a concentrated plasma blast toward the unknown ship. The energy beam raced through the void of space, closing the distance in mere seconds. But then, something unexpected happened. The moment the plasma struck the ship's shields, it dispersed instantly, vanishing like a drop of water on a hot rock. The Sci-Fi officers froze. That was impossible. No ship, no shield, no species in the galaxy had ever been able to absorb a Sci-Fi plasma blast. Even the mightiest warships would at least tremble under such firepower. Varlock's eyes twitched. That was just a warning shot, he muttered. Let's see how they handle a real attack. He clenched his clawed hand into a fist. Fire a full barrage. The Vorak's weapons roared to life, launching a devastating storm of plasma beams and torpedoes. The other Sci-Fi warships joined in, filling the darkness of space with a deadly, glowing light. And yet, the unknown ship did not move. It remained completely still, as if mocking them. The attacks vanished against its shields, each plasma blast absorbed, each torpedo detonated harmlessly. The Sci-Fi officers exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't normal. Varlock's heart pounded. This ship, whoever it belonged to, was playing with them. Then, without warning, the unknown ship moved. It turned toward the Vorak and accelerated with terrifying speed. Every alarm on the bridge began blaring. The scanning officer's voice shook. "Yes, sir. It's locking onto us." Varlock's cold confidence cracked. Evasive maneuvers. Now, the Vorak's engines flared, pushing the ship sideways, trying to escape. But the unknown vessel matched its every move, closing the distance with eerie precision. And then, the Sci-Fi ship's screens flickered. A transmission had been received. The bridge fell silent. No unknown species had ever dared to communicate after being attacked. Varlock hesitated before nodding to his officer. "Play it." A deep, distorted voice filled the room. "You fired first. Now you face the consequences." Varlock's blood ran cold. For the first time in his life, he felt fear. The silent hunter. The bridge of the Vorak was deathly silent. Admiral Varlock's claws gripped the edge of the control panel. His cold-blooded heart pounded against his ribs. He had faced countless battles, crushed rebellions, and watched civilizations burn. Never had he felt this kind of fear. The unknown ship had absorbed everything they threw at it. Plasma barrages, torpedoes, nothing even scratched it. And now it was coming for them. The deep, distorted voice from the transmission echoed in his head. You fired first. Now you face the consequences. Varlock straightened himself, shaking off the chill creeping down his spine. He was Sci-Fi, a predator, not prey. He turned to his officers. We still outnumber them. Order the fleet to surround it. Do not let it escape. The Sci-Fi warships repositioned, encircling the silent vessel like a pack of hunters trapping wounded prey. The Vorax targeting systems locked on. Varlock bared his sharp teeth. Fire everything. The void of space erupted as every Sci-Fi warship unleashed their full arsenal. A storm of destruction. Heavy cannons, rapid-fire lasers, seismic torpedoes. The sheer firepower was enough to reduce a planet to dust. And yet, the human warship did not move. Not a single defensive maneuver. No counterattack. It let the Sci-Fi fire. Varlock's hands trembled as he watched the results. The Sci-Fi fleet's greatest weapons, their most advanced technology, all of it vanished into the abyss. It was swallowing their attacks like a black hole. An eerie silence fell over the battlefield. The Sci-Fi fleet had just emptied their entire arsenal, their weapons overheated, systems cooling down. And the unknown ship, untouched, it sat there, as if mocking them. One of the officers whispered, This is impossible. Varlock's mouth went dry. No ship in the galaxy should be able to do this. Then, without warning, the unknown ship vanished. Gone. No movement, no engine signature, no warp jump detected. 1 second it was there. The next, nothing. The bridge descended into panic. Sir, we've lost visual. Scanning. Negative results. It's like it never existed. Varlock's breath caught in his throat. Stealth technology. But even the most advanced cloaking devices left energy traces. This was different. It was as if the ship had become part of the darkness itself. A new fear settled in his chest. They weren't hunting it. It was hunting them. Then, a single blip appeared on their radar. Behind them. Varlock's blood ran ice cold. Our red alert. Shields up. Too late. From the darkness of space, the unknown ship reappeared, directly above them. A massive shadow loomed over the Vorak, blocking out the distant stars. The Sci-Fi officers froze as they stared at the impossible. Their scanners had never been able to read the ship's design properly. But now, seeing it up close, they wished they never had. It was unlike any vessel they had ever seen. Sleek, black, like a beast made of shadows. The hull had no visible weapons, no exposed engines. It seemed to move without sound, without resistance. A predator in the void. Varlock's voice was barely a whisper. What are you? Then the human ship spoke. Not through a transmission. Not through an intercepted signal. It spoke directly through their ship's systems. Now it's our turn. The Vorax lights flickered. Control panels shut down. Weapons systems failed. The Sci-Fi fleet, once the dominant force of this sector, was now nothing more than prey. Varlock had always believed that his people were the hunters. But now, as the Vorak drifted powerless, he realized they were the ones being hunted. The hunter strikes. Admiral Varlock's scales tingled with an ancient instinct, the feeling of being watched by something far superior. The Vorak drifted, powerless. Screens flickered, warning lights flashed, but none of his officers moved. They were paralyzed with fear. Then the voice returned. You fired first. Now we respond. The words weren't spoken through standard transmissions. They came from everywhere, echoing through their systems, vibrating in their bones, as if the human ship itself was speaking. Varlock forced himself to stand tall. Identify yourself. Who are you? No response. Instead, something far worse happened. The Vorak's hull began to groan. Outside, in the vast darkness of space, the human ship moved. It wasn't fast. It wasn't aggressive. It was precise, controlled, hunting. A single beam of blue light lanced out from the mysterious warship. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. Instead, it passed right through their shields like they weren't even there. Then the ship screamed. Not the crew. The Vorak itself. The metal twisted, panels shattered, consoles sparked. A deep, gut-wrenching vibration spread through the entire ship, like something was tearing it apart from the inside. Varlock felt it. The Vorak, his mighty warship, his symbol of power, was in pain. Report. He roared, but his officers were already scrambling in panic. The shields, completely gone. Our weapons, they've been disabled. Navigation is failing. We're losing control. Varlock's throat dried. This was not a battle. This was a demonstration. Then the second attack came. A single burst of invisible force. No explosion, no fire. And yet, the Sci-Fi warships nearest to the human vessel vanished. One moment, they were there, fully armed destroyers, bristling with weapons. The next, empty space. No wreckage, no escape pods. Just gone. Silence spread through the bridge. Even the air felt heavier. A single message appeared on their failing screens. Stand down. Varlock clenched his claws. He was Zephyr. He did not surrender. He did not bow. But as he looked at the terrified faces of his crew, at the cold void where his ships once floated, he realized something terrible. This wasn't about survival. This was about understanding what they were up against. And for the first time in his life, Admiral Varlock felt truly powerless. He took a deep breath. Then, with a trembling hand, he gave the order he never thought he would. Cease all hostilities. For now, they would live. But deep inside, Varlock knew the war had already been lost. A warning from the void. Admiral Varlock had faced death before. He had fought in countless battles, commanded fleets that crushed entire civilizations, and stood before empires that begged for mercy. But never, never had he experienced this. The Vorak, once a symbol of Sci-Fi supremacy, drifted like a wounded beast in the darkness. Systems flickered, alarms blared, but the real damage wasn't to the ship. It was to the minds of his crew. The humans hadn't destroyed them. They hadn't fired a single lethal shot. Yet, they had won. Varlock's claws dug into the armrest of his command throne. His mind raced. What did they do to the missing warships? Were they vaporized, transported, consumed by some unknown force? His communications officer broke the silence. Admiral, we're receiving another transmission. Varlock exhaled sharply. Patch it through. The voice returned. Cold, controlled, inescapable. You have trespassed where you do not belong. Varlock clenched his jaw. This is Sci-Fi territory. You are the intruders. Silence. Then a deep, static-filled breath. No, you assume ownership of what was never yours. You spread like a wildfire, burning all in your path. But we are the storm that ends the fire. Varlock's hearts pounded. The Sci-Fi had conquered dozens of species. They had been called tyrants, destroyers, nightmares, but never had a species dared to speak to them like this. His second-in-command, Captain Kreth, hissed under his breath. Admiral, they're toying with us. Varlock didn't disagree, but before he could respond, the human ship moved. Not with the sluggish drift of a damaged vessel. Not with the slow adjustments of a retreating enemy. It moved like a predator circling prey. Effortless, precise, a shadow passing through the abyss. Then the stars blinked. One by one, entire constellations disappeared. Gasps filled the bridge. What is that? One of the officers stammered. Varlock's stomach twisted. A field. A weapon. A message. The human warship wasn't just a machine. It was a force of nature. The voice returned, softer this time, but no less terrifying. Leave this place. Do not return. Next time, there will be no warning. And then, the ship was gone. Not through a jump, not through a warp. It simply vanished, as if it had never been there. Silence hung over the bridge. No one spoke. Then, Kreth whispered what they were all thinking. "Admiral, we cannot fight this." Varlock stared at the void where the human warship had been. His claws uncurled from the armrest. His pride burned. His instinct screamed to strike back. But his survival demanded something else. Slowly, deliberately, he stood. "Send a message to the High Command," he ordered. Kreth hesitated. "What should I tell them?" Varlock exhaled, his throat dry. "Tell them, we are no longer the apex predators." The whisper of defeat. The Vorak limped through the void, its once mighty presence reduced to a silent wreck adrift in the abyss. Admiral Varlock sat motionless in his command throne. The weight of his defeat pressed against him, heavier than any battle wound. No war drums, no victorious roars. Only silence. The Sci-Fi were conquerors. They had never known true fear. But now, they had met something beyond their understanding. Captain Kreth broke the silence. His voice was hollow, barely above a whisper. "Admiral, our long-range scans have recalibrated." Varlock blinked, snapping from his trance. And Kreth hesitated. His scaled fingers trembled as he typed in the data. "Sir, the missing ships, they are still there." A cold shiver ran through the bridge. Every officer turned, their eyes wide. Varlock's claws tightened. "Explain." Kreth gulped. "They're not destroyed. They're trapped." Varlock strode to the main viewport. "Show me." The screen flickered. A massive, swirling anomaly hovered in space where the human warship had vanished. A perfect black sphere, featureless, endless, consuming light itself. And within it, the faintest outlines of ships frozen in time. Ghostly silhouettes of Sci-Fi warships, their weapons useless, their crews unseen. Suspended, trapped in a prison with no escape. A sickening realization sank into Varlock's mind. The humans had not erased them. They had taken them. A punishment far worse than death. A whisper slithered through the comms. "You were warned." The crew flinched. Officers backed away from their consoles, as if the very air had become toxic. Varlock's throat went dry. "Identify that signal." A young officer stammered, his voice cracking. "Sir, there is no signal. That voice. It's not coming from any frequency. It's inside the ship." Varlock's blood ran cold. Then the whisper spoke again. "Leave this space, Admiral Varlock. Take your fleet and never return, or your name will be forgotten like the rest." The viewport flickered, and the anomaly began to shrink. Smaller, smaller, until gone. And with it, the trapped ships. An empty void remained. No trace of what had happened. Captain Kreth exhaled, his breath shaky. "Admiral, we must go." Varlock said nothing. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. Slowly, he turned. "Set course for Sci-Fi Prime. Maximum speed." Kreth hesitated. "What about?" "Now, Captain," Varlock growled. The Vorak's engines roared to life, dragging the wounded fleet away from the battlefield, away from the unknown force that had humbled them. Varlock looked at the stars. He knew what would come next. The Sci-Fi High Command would demand answers. They would demand vengeance. But he knew the truth. This was not a war they could win. This was a war they could only survive, if the humans allowed it. Shadows of surrender. The Vorak raced through the void, its engines burning hotter than ever before. Admiral Varlock sat in his command chair, his claws gripping the armrests with unnatural tightness. He had spent his entire career leading conquests, not fleeing from them. And yet here he was, running from something beyond war, beyond reason. Captain Kreth stood beside him, eyes fixed on the navigation data. "Admiral, we will reach Sci-Fi Prime within the next rotation." Varlock exhaled slowly. "Prepare all battle logs. The High Command will demand a full report." Kreth hesitated. His scales darkened. "Sir, what do we tell them?" Varlock turned his gaze toward the vastness of space. The truth, that their unstoppable fleet had been rendered powerless in moments, that an enemy they had mocked had rewritten the very rules of war, that the humans had whispered into his mind, without comms, without signals, without mercy. No, the High Command would never accept that. But even if he lied, what good would it do? The Sci-Fi Empire had never known fear. Now, Varlock carried it within him. He leaned forward. "Tell them, we were outmatched." Kreth's eyes widened. "You mean?" "I mean we miscalculated. The humans have weapons beyond our understanding. Tell them that continuing this war will lead to unnecessary losses." He paused. "Tell them that the humans are not to be engaged." Kreth frowned. "Sir, you know they will demand retaliation." Varlock knew. The Sci-Fi Empire thrived on dominance. No war had ever ended without total victory. But this war was different. "Let the politicians argue," Varlock muttered. "Let the strategists plan. They can dream of vengeance all they want." He looked up, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But I will never set foot in human space again." A tense silence filled the bridge. For the first time in Sci-Fi history, a warlord had chosen to surrender, not by force, but by wisdom. Kreth swallowed. His claws twitched against the console. "Sir, what if the humans do not accept that?" Varlock closed his eyes. "Then we pray they have mercy." Meanwhile, deep within an uncharted region of space, hidden from Sci-Fi sensors, a lone human warship hovered in absolute silence. Commander Elias stood on the observation deck, staring at the tactical display. The Sci-Fi fleet was in full retreat. He smirked. They ran. Behind him, a soft voice spoke. "Just as predicted, sir." Elias turned. The AI construct, Nyx, hovered within the room, her glowing form flickering like a phantom. "Yeah," Elias muttered. "But the real question is, will they stay away?" Nyx tilted her head. "No, their nature won't allow it. They will return. And next time, they will bring everything they have." Elias exhaled. He already knew the answer. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The war that never came. The Sci-Fi fleet limped into their home system, battle-scared and shaken. The towering spires of Sci-Fi Prime gleamed under its twin suns, a city built on centuries of conquest. Yet, for the first time in history, a Sci-Fi war fleet returned home not in triumph, but in silence. Admiral Varlock stood before the High Command, his scales dim under the harsh red lighting of the war chamber. The Council of Warlords glared down at him from their elevated thrones. "You claim the humans cannot be defeated," snarled War Minister HFY. His mandibles twitched in barely contained fury. Varlock's claws dug into his palms. "I claim that war with them is pointless." A chorus of hisses filled the chamber. "Worthless cowardice," another warlord spat. "We have crushed civilizations 10 times their size. We will do the same to these humans." Varlock met their eyes, his voice calm but unyielding. "Then tell me, Minister, how do you fight an enemy that never fires the first shot, yet always wins?" Silence. The warlords wanted to dismiss his words, but the whispers had already spread. The surviving officers told their own stories, of human ships appearing from nowhere, of weapons that disabled, not destroyed, of voices creeping into their minds without comms. The Sci-Fi had always believed in strength through war. But what if they had finally met a species that saw war itself as an outdated concept? Cyril's mandibles clicked, frustrated. "We will not cower before them." Varlock shook his head. You misunderstand. We are not their enemy. Tyrell scoffed. Oh, then what are we? Varlock's next words changed the Empire forever. A test. The chamber fell still. He took a slow breath, letting the weight of his realization settle. They watched us. They studied our fleet. They could have wiped us from existence. His voice dropped. But they didn't. A cold dread seeped into the warlord's expressions. The humans had every opportunity to annihilate us. Varlock continued. Instead, they only reacted. They only showed force when we forced their hand. And every time, they left us a way out. Why? Another warlord whispered. Varlock turned his gaze upward, to the darkened ceiling that hid the stars. Because they wanted to see if we would take it. For the first time in their empire's history, the Sci-Fi had a choice. They could wage a war they now knew they could never win. Or they could walk away. A war that never came. Was the war the humans had truly won. Meanwhile, on Earth, Commander Elias stood in a quiet observation chamber, gazing at the holographic display of Sci-Fi Prime. Behind him, Nex's soft, synthetic voice whispered, "They understand now." Elias exhaled. Not fully, but it's a start. A pause. Nyx flickered, her light shifting. What if they had refused to back down? Elias smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then humanity would have done what it always does. Nyx studied him. And what is that? He turned away from the stars. Adapt.